Avengers Doomsday is releasing later this year, and to lead up to the release of the next huge event movie, I'm ranking each phase of the MCU. And so today we're gonna rank the 6 movies of MCU Phase 2 on this tier list. So of course, we have to start with
Jarvis, I'm my pants.
Right away, sir.
Iron Man 3. I have a very complicated history with this movie. I absolutely hated it for reasons we will discuss soon. But now, and after a change in perspective, I have to be honest and say I actually enjoy Iron Man 3. Well, let's first talk about the things I have always enjoyed about this movie. The cast across the board does a phenomenal job. The returning actors like Robert Downey Jr., Gwyneth Paltrow, Jon Favreau, Don Cheadle, they're all fantastic here and still deliver great work as these characters. And the new cast is solid too. Sir Ben Kingsley is pretty funny as Trevor, and Guy Pearce delivers a charismatically sinister performance as Aldrich Killian. There were some story decisions I always thought were great too. Enduring Happy early on is a perfect way to get the plot going. It raises the emotional stakes, and I'm pretty sure this is the only instance where the director of a film's previous 2 installments gets blown up in the 3rd film. Kinda odd.
What the fuck?
And the relationship between Tony and Pepper remains the heart and soul of the Iron Man films. Well, let's go ahead and talk about Tony's personal character arc in this movie, because it's one of those things I didn't quite like when I was younger but have grown to appreciate. Tony has some capital P PTSD. After the Avengers and nearly dying, he's completely panicked by the thought of not being able to protect the people in his life. So he gets to work, making suits for every situation he can think of. He forgets things like sleep and health, and dedicates his whole life to making sure that Iron Man can be there. But as the story unfolds, he's forced to face his fears head on. Happy gets hurt, Pepper seemingly dies, and Tony is forced to face it all without a suit. But he buckles down, he uses his wits, and he makes it through these events because gosh dang it, he is Iron Man whether he has the armor or not. It's a very well written story of a hero becoming less afraid and coming to terms with the fact that no matter what will come his way, he will think of something. And as an ending to this trilogy, it works really well. But when I was younger, I strongly disliked the fact that Tony got rid of his arc reactor. Of course, now I think it's the perfect representation of his character growth, but when I was a kid, I often complained when things weren't comic book accurate. And boy did I hate Iron Man 3 and all of its inaccuracies, mostly pointed to the main villain and the twist behind the Mandarin.
My name's Trevor Slattery.
I hated this Mandarin twist so much, because instead of a faithful adaptation of who I saw as Iron Man's biggest enemy, the movie subverted expectations. But as I've gotten older, I've come to change my opinions on comic book accuracy in superhero movies. I simply do not care as much. It's perfectly fine to make changes from the comic books, as long as you tell an interesting story through that change. And I think Iron Man 3 is an example of an interesting change. Aldrich Killian is a much better villain than I previously thought. In the beginning 1999 scene, we see that he feels personally slighted by Tony, and so he spends his whole life becoming richer, prettier, and more successful than Tony Stark. He is one petty fella, but his evil scheme of orchestrating a war on terror works and makes sense. And you can see his clear path to wealth by assassinating the president and selling extremist tech to the corrupted VP, whose daughter, by the way, is Jenna Ortega. I think it's so funny how every time someone asks her if she wants to join the MCU, she says she was already in it, because you can clearly tell that she does not want to be part of the modern MCU, which is fair. I can't imagine very many people would.
I'm in tremendous pain! I'm in tremendous pain! Help me! Help me! Help me!
So while this silly, get a white boy speak a little Chinese version of the Mandarin isn't at all accurate, as a brand new iteration, he works. And we got the actual Mandarin later on, so all is well. Iron Man 3 isn't a perfect movie by any means. It has some odd dialogue at times. There isn't a ton of connection between the main story and Tony's personal story. A lot of the action in the movie is just sort of mid or poorly edited, but the strong parts of Iron Man 3 are very strong. So I'm gonna have to put it in A tier.
Wait a minute! Who are you?
Thor: The Dark World. Like Iron Man 3, Thor: The Dark World is one of those MCU movies that has always been considered one of the worst of the franchise. But unlike Iron Man 3, I still think Thor: The Dark World is pretty bad.
Yeah, you suck.
Oh boy, where do I even start? I guess let's start with the villain Malekith. Malekith isn't the worst villain in the MCU, but he's absolutely the most boring and most forgettable. He has an okay motivation. In order to save his dying race, he wants to use the Aether to plunge the 9 realms into darkness like how it once was thousands of years ago. But that's it. That little snippet of storytelling is all Malekith gets. He has no character outside of that, no personality. no anything. He's really emblematic of the film as a whole, because he is just so flat, dull, and boring. And poor Christopher Eccleston is given nothing to work with. I was a pretty big Doctor Who fan back in the day, so I know this man is a very talented and capable actor, but he can't do anything to salvage his character. He's forced to be as lame as the writing. And come to think of it, a few different Doctor actors played Marvel villains. Eccleston, David Tennant, and Matt Smith. And they went 1 for 3 because Malekith and Matt Smith Vampire were just not it.
So we back in the mine, got our pickaxe.
And to add insult to injury, he isn't even the best villain in the movie where he is the main villain. Curse absolutely mogs this man all day, every day. While Curse doesn't have as much character like Malekith, what he does have is presence and an intimidation factor. He is one scary dude, and pretty much all the watchable scenes of the film are his. The Virgin Malekith versus the Chad Curse or whatever. The Dark World is an ugly movie. While the first Thor didn't look especially spectacular, it did look like a real movie, but so much of the Dark World just looks like gray sludge. It's so boring looking. There's never any interesting lighting, and despite the visuals not being the most important part of a movie, a boring villain, boring visuals, and a boring story makes for a real hot mess of a movie. So let's get into it. The story.
So, back in the day, jingle, 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 back in the day, before the back rooms were a thing, okay? Jingle, jingle, pay attention.
The MCU has had good stories. It has had bad stories, but Thor: The Dark World is the first truly boring story of this franchise. The main plot is incredibly basic. Bad guy gonna do bad things and good guy has to stop him. There's no deeper themes, no crazy twists, nothing to make the story more exciting. But that's not necessarily a deal breaker. If The Dark World had good character stories, it could still be a good movie. It doesn't have good character stories. Not a single character is written well here. Thor starts the movie wanting to leave Asgard and go and protect Earth, and he feels exactly the same at the end of the movie. His inner struggle between his duty to Asgard and his duty to Earth is not well represented at all. Neither is his romance with Jane Foster, who also has nothing to do in this movie. She's just kinda here for the ride. Loki is close to having a solid redemption arc, but his story isn't finished in the Dark World. He fakes his own death, and so he only has like half a redemption story. Although I did enjoy some of the scenes with him and Frigga. Loki was probably still the best part of this movie, even if he only got like half a story.
Well done. You just decapitated your grandfather.
Thor: The Dark World is a real rough experience. It's painfully boring throughout the entire runtime, and I have no desire to watch it ever again. So it's gonna have to go in D tier.
Why do birds?
Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I went into detail about this movie in my Captain America ranking from last year, but my opinions have not changed at all. So I'm gonna give you the cliff notes and direct you to that video if you want my more in-depth thoughts about the movie. Winter Soldier presents a good story for Steve, who's trying to find his new place in the world. Other characters like Natasha and Nick Fury have solid character stories as well. Sam Wilson makes his introduction here, and he's a great inclusion. Something something on your left. The Winter Soldier himself was incredible, and Bucky's future appearances have yet to top his performance here. Bro was a straight menace. The visuals are solid. The story greatly impacts the rest of the MCU, and this movie has some of the best action sequences of the franchise. It's just all around a great movie, and it's going in S tier.
Said it yourself, bitch. We're the Guardians.
Guardians of the Galaxy. This is a special movie both in general and to me specifically. I always enjoyed movies throughout my entire life, but I wasn't nearly as serious about them until Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, this was the first ever Blu-ray in my collection. The first of hundreds. I've completely lost track of how many I own now. But let's talk about what makes this movie so special by first talking about James Gunn, a polarizing figure nowadays. But back in 2014, his touch made Guardians of the Galaxy the great cinematic experience that it is. There has been humor in MCU movies before this, but no one has found a balance between serious moments and comedy quite like Gunn. And there are so many funny moments that still kill even now, over 11 years later. But the humor never oversteps its bounds. It never takes away from the stakes of the movie or ruins any sincere moments. And there are even times when the humor adds to the more serious moments, like Peter's dance-off to save the universe. It makes sense within the scene as a distraction, and it fits in character with Peter Quill. Also, it's just freaking funny.
Dance off, bro.
Me and you.
Visually, this is one of my favorite Marvel films. It's colorful and vibrant, while also having a very dingy, lived-in aesthetic. And you can see this with the sets, the costuming, and even with how the movie is lit. Also, a bunch of these action scenes are excellently filmed. I don't think they're on the same level as the fights we'll see in the second and third films, but the prison escape, the aerial battle on Xandar, and the final standoff with Ronan are probably the standouts here. But of course, we have to talk about the soundtrack. Guardians of the Galaxy has maybe the best soundtrack in any movie ever. And that's not an opinion, that's a straight up fact. Not only are all the songs absolute bangers on their own, but they perfectly fit within the cinematic language of the movie. They're all integral to the storytelling. I mean, what would Guardians of the Galaxy be without Hooked on a Feeling, or Fooled Around and Fell in Love, or Come and Get Your Love? I mean, as soon as I hear that, I am locked in. Guardians of the Galaxy would already be a pretty good MCU movie with the stuff I already mentioned, but it's the characters and how they're written that sends it over the top. We've seen the found family trope a bunch, but very few movies have done it to the level of this. Each of the characters have well-written arcs. They start off as their own individual selfish jerks, and grow to care for each other and see their potential to be heroes. And individually, they all have their own little character growths. Rocket overcomes some of his insecurities regarding his existence, and uses his talents for good. Groot becomes the moral core of the group, and even sacrifices himself for them. Rest in peace, original Groot. Drax leaves his need for revenge behind him, to focus on the new life he has in front of him. Gamora separates herself from the family that abused her, and found a new family that actually cares for her. And Peter Quill, of course, goes through the biggest character change. He finds peace with his mother's death. The Guardians become his new family, and he's able to move on and finally process his grief. Movies with this big of a cast can struggle to give everyone compelling character arcs, but Guardians does it with flying colors. And this cast is freaking nuts. Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Bradley Cooper, and Vin Diesel. These are easily some of the best superhero castings of all time, and they each become their characters. Especially Vin Diesel, who's really stretching his acting legs here. I mean, he goes through the entire movie without saying family. Must have been pretty difficult. A bunch of the side characters are extremely memorable too. We'll talk about Nebula and Yondu more when I cover Phase 3, but they're both pretty cool inclusions here. Benicio del Toro, John C. Reilly, Peter Serafinowicz, and Glenn Close deliver solid performances in their roles as well, and I love the cameos from Cosmo, Howard the Duck, and Thanos. But there's one more person we have to discuss. The main villain, Ronan the Accuser.
Who?
Ronan is... he's fine. I think people have been way too harsh on this villain over the years, because while I agree he isn't a top tier MCU villain, he's far better than the likes of Malekith or Whiplash or really any Disney Plus show villain. He has simple motivations, he's a space racist who wants to wipe out all of Xandar, and he's reasonably threatening. He beats Drax with no effort and then gets an Infinity Stone, but he doesn't often show very much personality. He's just an angry little blue guy most of the time, but at least Lee Pace is good in this role, and most of this character's intimidating aura comes from his performance. Also, just a side note, I cannot wait to hear him as Thrag in Invincible. He's gonna be incredible. But all in all, Guardians of the Galaxy is one of the best movies of the entire MCU. Potentially the single best movie of the MCU. So it's gonna have to go all the way in S tier.
Rankers.
Avengers Age of Ultron. This is considered to be the worst Avengers movie by most people, and yeah, it absolutely is. Okay, it's not a garbage movie by any stretch. The most problematic thing about it is how messy the script is. It simply tries to do too much, and it struggles to juggle all the plot lines it has. There's the main story with Ultron, there's the future movie setup, and there's the numerous character stories that are very hit or miss. So let's break it down piece by piece, starting with the main Ultron plotline. As the physical manifestation of Tony Stark's best intentions, Ultron works as a villain. His motivation to wipe out humanity is clear, his plan on making the perfect next step in evolution makes sense, and he's a huge threat who creates a ton of stakes. But I have to be honest, the worst part of Ultron is his design. The poor guy just looks like a mess. I really hate the very human eyes and lips. They just kind of freak me out. I think something similar to the Ultron drones would have been much cooler, where it's just a blank face, like the very first scene with Ultron where he has that kind of face. It works really well there.
And I was tangled in strings.
I'm so scared right now. You shut up.
There are so many darn character stories in this movie, and they really ruin the pacing. Thor has a side quest where he learns about Ragnarok and the Infinity Stones, and this stuff only kinda affects this movie. But really, this whole thing is just to set up Ragnarok, Infinity War, and Endgame, and feels completely out of place here. The Natasha and Bruce romance is famously hated. I don't hate the concept of it, but the execution is so rough. I mean, there's a couple scenes where they cry about how they can't be together, and that's about it. It's so underdeveloped. Oh, and there's of course this wacky scene.
Sorry.
I don't know why Joss Whedon finds this so funny, because he did the same bit in Justice League. You do it once, it's a bad joke. You do it twice, and it's probably the writer's poorly disguised fetish. But there are examples of well done character stories, and Hawkeye probably has the best story of the film. Age of Ultron presents him as the heart of the team. He's just a regular guy with a bow and arrow. He's a reminder to the rest of the team of who they're fighting for, the normal people who can't possibly fight against aliens or robots or wizards. And I like how he's kind of a mentor figure to Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Also, rest in peace, Quicksilver. Gone and also forgotten by most people.
Get away from me! Why are you chasing me? Stop it! Get back here so you can get away from me!
So the script of Age of Ultron isn't perfect. It's pretty messy in a lot of ways and absolutely the reason Joss Whedon never returned for another Marvel project. But there's a bunch of other stuff in the movie that I think is great. For one, the action downright slaps. Some of these sequences are top tier MCU fights. And the highlight has to be the Hulkbuster fight. Oh my goodness, is it beautiful. Even though the rest of the Avengers have tapped out, Tony Stark is simply that guy. And he 1v1 the Hulk and frickin' won. My goodness, what a scene.
I'm sorry.
But my favorite part of Age of Ultron has to be Vision. His story of figuring out what he is executed very well. I love the character design and how his powers are represented, and Paul Bettany gives a brilliant performance. I mean, that final conversation between him and Ultron is something special. Overall, Age of Ultron is a hot mess in the story department, but completely baller in every other way. So I'm gonna give it a strong B tier. But before we move on to the final film of the MCU's second phase, I just want to say we are getting very, very close to 100,000 subscribers. And once we do, I'm releasing a ranking of every Star Wars movie and show. The good ones and the bad ones. So if you want to see that, make sure you're subscribed. But now, let's move on to...
Are you only 5'6"?
Did you say only? Did I hear that?
Ant-Man. It's not the greatest MCU film of all time, but it feels unique within the greater universe because of how small scale it is. You see what I did there? Small scale? Because Paul Rudd's not particularly tall. No, but really, the story of Ant-Man doesn't present some huge catastrophe or some world-ending cataclysm. It's instead about stopping dangerous technology from falling into the wrong hands. And because the story doesn't have those huge universe-defining consequences, it allows the character stories to shine more. Ant-Man is an underdog story, which makes complete sense for this superhero. Scott Lang is not the greatest guy in the world. He means well and wants to be a good father, but his past mistakes haunt him, and he's the type of guy who always tries to take the easy way out. But once he's given a second chance and the opportunity to be the next Ant-Man, his true character shines through. And he goes above and beyond to prove to Hank, Hope, and especially his daughter that he is a true hero. It's a very good character arc, made even better by Paul Rudd's instantly likable performance. It really is just a shame that they made him actually brain dead in the sequels.
He has 7 holes.
Yeah, that's right.
This version of Hank Pym is pretty cool. Making the original Ant-Man an older mentor to the new Ant-Man works perfectly, because it creates this rich backstory where you can tell he's carrying a lot of baggage and is really beating himself up over what happened to his wife, which is a lot better than him just beating his wife.
Oh no!
And despite phoning it in future installments, Michael Douglas is pretty good here. And the complex relationship between Hank and Hope is also well developed. They have a good story about rebuilding their connection. But let's talk about the coolest part of Ant-Man, the action. The action here is extremely unique compared to other MCU films and even to future Ant-Man installments. The mini-scale combat creates some very funny moments and also some very memorable visuals, like the single coolest shot in the entire movie. Frick yeah, that's cool. But we should probably discuss the weakest part of Ant-Man, and that's the villain. Darren Cross is lame as hell. His motivations are somewhat effective. He feels betrayed by Hank Pym, so much so that he plans on killing him and using his technology for evil. That's not even really his main motivation. He's really doing this all for money, which is kinda boring. And he also never feels threatening. Even when he puts on the yellow jacket suit, he just never seems like that guy.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Darren was a better character when he was MODOK, and I will die on that hill. But all in all, I really do enjoy Ant-Man. It's always been one of my favorite MCU movies, and I think people really sleep on it. So it's gonna go in A tier. And that's my ranking of every Marvel movie of MCU Phase 2. Make sure to leave your own ranking down in the comments, and stay tuned for my ranking of other MCU phases. And if you haven't seen me rank the first phase of the MCU, you can do so right here.